Hi, my name is Waza, and I'm going to take you through an introduction to music theory. Just some background, I haven't studied music. This is all theory I've picked up over time. I play guitar, a bit of keyboard, but I literally have drawn up these guides to help myself, and hopefully they can help you. Okay, let's start at the beginning. In music, what notes do we have? So I'm just using Excel here. I'm going to write out the different topics as we go, and you can follow me if you want to keep a record of all this music theory for yourself, or I'll put a copy of this in my Google Drive and link it to the video below. So, how many notes are there in music? Okay, to answer that, there are 7 natural notes. And those 7 natural notes are A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And then we would go back to A again. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 natural notes. Now those 7 natural notes are fine, but there are actually 12 notes in music. So let's just make a record of that. There are 12 notes in music. And if we're looking at that now, we're going to say, well, how come are there 12? Those are the 7 natural notes. You get notes that are sharp and notes that are flat. So, for instance, if we were going up a keyboard, for instance, you would notice that there are white keys and there are black keys. The black keys are the sharps or flats. Now, depending on what scale you're in, it might depend whether a note is deemed sharp or flat, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So if we're looking at going up the keyboard, we would play the A note. Next to the A note would be a black key. That would be A sharp. Then we'd have the B note. These two here you need to be aware of. There is no sharp or flat between the notes of B and C and E and F. So that's what you need to be aware of. So the next note would be B. The note next to that would be C. The note next to that would be C sharp, B sharp, E. E and F have no sharps, so we would have an F sharp and a G sharp, and the next note we'd find would be A. So if we look at those, we have 12 notes in total in music. If we're not looking at the sharps and flats, we have 7 natural notes. If we were going down the keyboard, we would refer to these notes as flats. So if we went here and we started on A and we worked our way back, the note next to the A key would be A flat. And we define the flat note by putting a little small character B that stands for flat, and this hash symbol stands for sharp. Now you're going to say to me, but if we were on G and we went to the next note, we had G sharp and then A, and here we're going backwards, we're going A flat to G. How does that work? These two would be the same note. They are actually the same. These here can be named differently depending on what scale you are looking at. So in other words, if we already have a G in a scale, you can't have 2 of the same note. So you can't have a G and a G sharp in the same scale. So if that was the case, we would have to call it A flat. We would have a G and an A flat in a scale. If we already had an A in a scale, we couldn't have an A and an A flat in a scale, so then we would call it G sharp. So that is the reason it's the same physical fret on the guitar. It's the same note, the same key, meaning the physical key that you push down on the piano, but it can be called a different name depending on what context it's being used. So here we would have G flat, we'd go to F, we'd go to E. Again, you can see there's no flat going from F to E because there's no sharp going from E to F. Here we would have E flat, B, B flat, C. Again, between B and C, there are no sharps or flats. There's no sharp going from B to C. There's no flat going from C to B. B flat down to A. So depending which way you're going, you might actually call these notes something different. But all of these are exactly the same. Those two are exactly the same. These two are the same. These two are the same. Just depending, as I said, you can't have an E and an E flat in the same key or scale. You'd have to have an E and a D sharp. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so those are the 12 notes from a sharp perspective, sharps and flats. Okay. I'll take you through a bit of a better presentation of this once we finished writing it out, but this might be good for you to just keep for your own record, or you can download it off the drive. Okay, so these notes that have got two different names are called enharmonic notes, meaning they're the same pitch, they just have a different name depending on what context you use them. They are called enharmonic notes. That means that they can be two different symbols. Okay, so now we're looking at intervals. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at the key of C, because C has got no sharp or flat note. It's the only key that has no enharmonic note. So the key of C, let's have a look, and we can take exactly what we have up here, because those are the natural notes, and we can put them down at the bottom here. But now, before we get to that, we need to look at the major scale formula. So the major scale has a formula, and the major scale is the basis of all music theory. So the major scale formula is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Or it could be 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. And what that means, these are tones or semitones, or they, whole tone means 2 frets on a guitar or 2 keys on a keyboard, and a half tone is literally the note right next door to the note that we're currently on. So this 221 would mean 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret. It could also be written out tone, 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 semitone, tone, 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 semitone. What it means is if we are looking at the 12 notes, a whole step would be from C, if we're going to do in the key of C. So let's start on C here. So this would be the C major scale that we are doing. We would start on C, C major scale. Sorry, let me just take that out. C major scale. Let's start on C. So if we're starting on C here, and we need to do a whole step, that would mean 2 jumps, or a tone would be 2 jumps, or a whole step's 2 frets, however you want to look at it. So we're going to go 1, 2, we get D. So our next note in the key of C major, or the C major scale, would be D. So we've gone 1, 2 to D, 1, 2 to E. The next one would be E. We're on E. So we do 2 to 1, now we jump 1. So we're just going to get F. And now we jump 2, 2, 2, 1. So we're on F. We jump 2, 1, 2, we get G. We jump 2 again, 1, 2. So in other words, we would just start back at the beginning. We're starting back at A, so we would get A. Jump 2 again, 1, 2 to B. And then 1 to C. We'd be back at C again. So that is the major scale formula. You jump a whole step or 2 frets or 2 keys on the piano. If you're starting on C, C is going to be the root or the key that you're looking at. It would be 1, 2, another 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. Or tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, depending on how you want to write it out. Or it could be whole step, half step. A whole step is 2 frets, half step is 1 fret. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step. So if we did that starting on C, we would get the C major scale, which is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, back to C. So those are the notes of the major scale. Now another rule around the major scale is that for each of these notes, there would be an interval linked to them. So if we go back to our initial 12 notes that we have in every key, if we were looking at, for instance, A, just because it's the first letter here, if that was our root, the key right next to it would be what they call a minor second or a flat second. So we can go a minor second or flat second. So that would be your flat 2, meaning that is the name of the distance between the root and the very next key going up. The B would be your second. The C would be your flat third. Your C sharp would be your third. Your D would be what they call your perfect fourth, because there's no flat version of it, it's just the fourth. Your D sharp would be your flat 5, or tritone they often call it, that's your blues note, your flattened fifth. Your E would be your fifth interval. Your F would be your flat 6 or minor 6. The F sharp would be your 6th. The G would be your flat 7. G sharp would be your 7. And A would be back to your root. That would be your 1, or you could call it an 8 for an octave or something like that. So in any key, or in all music notes, those are your intervals. So if you play an A to a C note, you're playing a flat third interval. So that's what that is there. And if we started from C, and C is the 1, the note next to it would be the flat 2 of C. And then you would get the 2 of C would be the D sharp. So whatever note you start, this naming is consistent no matter what note you started on. So in other words, if we had a never-ending fretboard or keyboard, we put that there, and it just continued forever. If we started on C and we made C our root, and we wanted to know all the intervals from C, we could take exactly these intervals here, and we could paste them under C. E flat would be the flat 2 to C, D would be your 2, E flat would be your flat 3, E would be your 3, etc., etc. If we were doing the key of G, we could take that, we could paste it on G. If G is our root, A would be the second, B would be the third, B flat would be the flat third, the fifth would be D, the sixth would be E. So that's how we can look at intervals. So those are how intervals work. And intervals are consistent. That's always the distance from your root note to every other note in the 12 note list of notes that we have. So in music, we have 12 notes. If you pick a note to start on, these intervals would be relative to that note that we're starting on. So I hope that makes sense. But that's what our intervals are. And now, because we're looking at the key of C, we can just move this back to C. So if we're looking at all notes relative to C, we're looking at D flat would be our flat 2, etc. But in the major scale, we're looking at the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the 7. That's our whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half formula. So we would highlight that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. That would be our C major. We're going a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So in the C major scale, the intervals we have in that scale, here we've taken the notes out. We have a 1, we have a 2, we have a 3, we have a 4, we have a 5, we have a 6, we have a 7, and we're back at our root, our 1 or our 8, however you want to call it. So that is our C, the key of C, or our C major scale. And that's how we get to it here. We apply the formula, and then we can see from using that formula what are the intervals that are in the key we're looking at. And sometimes we look, there might be flats or sharps, depending on how the notes work. The key of C has no flats or sharps, but these intervals are always relative. They're always the same. You're just starting on a different note of choice. So there's our key of C. So that's what intervals are. If we go and we look at the major scale formula now, always, if we're saying these are our notes, we have 8 notes. So let's move back down here. These are the notes we have in our key. And for every note in the major scale, we have a related chord. So we have a 1 chord, a 2 chord, a 3 chord, a 4 chord, a 5 chord, 6 chord, 7 chord, back at our 1 chord or our root. And we also have that amount of notes in the major scale. So for each scale tone, we have a chord. So this would be known as our 1 chord. That would be our 3 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord, etc. So if you're playing a 1, 4, 5 in the key of C, you would be playing a C chord, an F chord, and a G chord. So that's linking chords to the different notes in the scale. Now another rule is that we have different tonalities for the chord. So your 1 chord is always a major, your 2 chord is always a minor, your 3 chord is always a minor, your 4 chord is always a major, 5 chord is always a major, your 6 chord is always a minor, and the 7th chord is a diminished chord. We're not going to worry too much about that. But we always have 3 major chords. Your 1, your 4, and your 5 are always major. Your 2, your 3, and your 6 are always minor. So if we were playing a 1, 4, 5 progression, we would play a C major, an F major, and a G major. If we were playing a 1, 5, 6, 4 progression, we would play 1, C major, 5, G major, 6, A minor, because 6 is a minor, and then 4 would be F major. So keep that in mind. That's the golden rule. 1, 4, 5. Think of your blues progressions are normally a 1, 4, 5. They're major. 2, 3, and 6 are minor. So this is either major or minor. And the rule here is major chords are 1, 4, 5, and minor chords are 2, 3, and 6. So now we know what our major and minor chords are out of our key. So if ever you've seen something, you now can go and write your own music. You know exactly what chords you can use and which are major and which are minor. Okay. So 1, 4, and 5 are always major. 2, 3, and 6 are always minor. 7 is a diminished chord. Okay. So now if we start looking at the notes of the chord, how do we make up a C chord? So chords are made up, triads, if you want to call them triads, 3 notes, 3-note chords, are made up of a 1, a type of third, and a 5th note. So 1, 3, and 5. Major chord, because you can hear from it, it's a major, would be a 1, a major 3, and a 5. And a minor chord is a 1, a flat 3, and a 5. So if we were looking at intervals here, a major chord would be a 1, a major third, and a 5. So the notes that make up an A major would be A, the major third is C sharp, and the 5 is E. So A, C sharp, and E would make up an A major chord. If we wanted an A minor chord, we would take the 1, the flat 3, and the 5. So A minor is A, C, and E, because we've flattened the third to get the flat third. A major would be A, C sharp, E. It's got a major third, not a minor third. So chord formulas, major chord is always 1, 3, and 5. A minor chord is 1, flat 3, and 5. So if we were looking at that, if we wanted to make a C major chord, so yeah, C, what would the notes be in a C major chord? Well, we're looking at the note C. We need a major third, because we're looking at C major. Our 1 chord is major, would be E, would be our 3, and our 5 would be G. So C would be made up of C, E, and G. You play those 3 notes anywhere on the fretboard and you're playing a C major. So that would be a major. And if you wanted to play a C minor, there is no C minor in the key of C. But if you wanted to, all you would do is flatten the third. C, E flat, and G would be a minor chord. The C, the 1 of the chord, and the 5 of the chord don't change. So the C and the G notes are in both an A major and an A minor. In a C major and C minor, apologies. The middle note, if it's a major note, the third, it'll be a major chord, and if it's a minor note or flattened third, it will be a minor chord. Okay. If we look at our key of C here, we can see we went C, E, and G. So a very easy way of building up your chords is you pick a note, skip a note, pick a note, skip a note, pick a note. And this is out of your major scale. So your C, if we're looking at C, if we want to know what notes make up a C chord, we go pick that one, skip one, pick one, skip one, pick one, C, E, G. If we wanted to know what notes make up a D minor chord, remember your 2 chord is always minor. We would start with D, skip one, pick one, skip one, pick one. D, F, A. D, D, F, A. We know that that's minor. E, we know E is minor. E, minor. What notes make up an E minor chord? We start on E, skip one, G, skip one, B. E, G, and B make up an E minor chord. Now we're on the 4 chord. This is your 1 chord, your 2 chord, your 3 chord, your 4 chord. 5, 6, 7. Our 4 chord is going to be F. 5 chord is going to be G. 6 chord is a minor, and this will be that B diminished chord. So F, if we start on F, let's go down here, F, we skip one, we get A, we jump over, we get C, F, A, C, F, A, C. G, we start on G, skip one, pick one, go back to the beginning, skip one, pick one, G, B, and D. G, B, E. A minor, we start on A, skip one, start at the beginning, C, skip one, E. A, C, and E. Why is that a minor? If we look at the 12 notes, remember our example up here, we're looking at A. We want an A minor, so we take the flat third, so we take a C, A, and C, and the 5th is E. That's why it's A, C, and E. If this was A major, it would be A, C sharp, and E. We would raise that flattened third to a normal third. Our diminished works exactly the same. We start on B, we hop over C, onto D, we hop over E onto F. So B, D, and F would give you a diminished chord, B, D, and F. So that's how we can now, we know the 12 notes in music. We know how to define intervals from any starting note continuing. We know how to create any major scale using the whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, or 2-2-1, 2-2-2-1, etc. We can then pull out any major scale. From that major scale, we always know the 1, 4, and 5 are major chords because there will be 7 notes in the scale, and each note will have its own chord. And we know 1, 4, and 5 are major, 2, 3, and 6 are minor, always, B is diminished. If we want to go and figure out how to make those chords, we start on the note we're looking for. We pick one, skip one, pick one, skip one, pick one. We do that 3 times. That'll give us our basic minor and major triads. So if we had to do the exact same thing, let's look at the key of G. So if I had to go and say, all right, I want to do the key of G. So let's go and grab all of these notes here. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to touch on C before we get onto G. I've touched on all of the how to build the chords. No, that's fine. So let's go here and look at the key of G now. So we've done the key of C. We're going to look at the key of G. So let me grab all the notes that we have in music. Grab all of these here. Paste them down here. Add a few on the end so that we have a longer keyboard or fretboard or whatever. So we want to look at the key of G. So we're going to look at G here. We know from what we have at the top here what the major scale is. So the formula for the major scale is 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. We also know this is the major scale formula. Widen this thing a bit. It's 2-2-1, 2-2-2-1. We know that. And we also know that the intervals are consistent. So if we take those intervals and we paste them under G, G is our 1, G sharp would be our flat 2, A would be our 2, A sharp would be our flat 3, B would be our 3, etc., all the way up. And you can see here that our 7th falls under F sharp, flat 7 under F. Remember, C had no sharps or flats. So let's go now and do our formula to get the G major scale. So we want the G major scale. So we start on G, and we do whole. So I'm just going to make the ones that are in the key of G a different color. I'll make them like a light green. So we got G, we jump a whole step onto A, whole step onto B, half step, because it's 2, 2, 1 onto C. So we've done 2, 2, 1. Now we do 2, 2, 2, 1. So we got 2 to D, 2 to E, 2 to F sharp, and 1 back to G. So you can see the key of G has got 1 sharp. Where C had F, we now have an F sharp, which is fine for us. So let's go and write out our G major scale. We've got G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, back to G. So you can see this is pretty similar to the C scale. The only difference is C major has got an F natural note and G major has got an F sharp. Other than that, the notes are pretty similar. Okay, so we know this is 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we're back at 1. There are no, in the major scale, we have no, using our formula, we have a 1, a 2, a 3. We don't have any of the flat intervals. And some people get confused because this is an F sharp note. Doesn't mean we derived it from a sharp interval or anything. It is just the way the notes fall. the intervals are always the same. So this is the scale, and these are the intervals. Okay, we know that the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord are major. So if we're playing a 1-4-5 in G, we would play G, C, and D. We know that A minor, B minor, E minor, and F sharp diminished would be the other chords. So in the key of G, we have G major, we have A minor, we have B minor, we've got C major, E major, E minor, and we have F sharp diminished. Is that all the notes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. If we needed to find out what notes make up each one of these chords, we wanted to find a G chord, or we wanted to go and figure out how to play it, we need a 1, 3, and a 5 because it's a major chord. We need a 1 flat 3 and a 5 4 minor chord. But the easier way is just to do pick one, skip one 3 times. So we pick one, it would be G, skip A, pick B, skip C, pick D. G, B, D. G, B, D are the notes of that G major chord. A would be A minor, A, C, E. B minor, we pick B, skip C, pick D, miss E, pick F sharp. That would be B, D, and F sharp. C would be C, E, and G. D would be D, F sharp, and A. F sharp and A. E minor would be E, G, and B. F sharp diminished would be F sharp, A, C. Sharp, A, and C. Now, why in this key are we calling it F sharp and not G flat? Because in a key, we can only have one letter. We can't have G and G sharp, or A and A flat, B and B flat, C, C sharp. There can only be one of each letter of the alphabet. So we can't have G, A, B, C, D, E, G flat, G, because then there would be 2 Gs. So we call this, instead of G flat, we call it F sharp. Now we have A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. We only have one of each letter. So that's the reasoning behind the top here having flats and sharps. We can't have a G sharp or a G flat and a G in the same scale. It would be too confusing. Even though they're the same note, we need one of every letter. So there we know how to define our chords. And then if we're looking at it, you'll often hear relative major and minor. We'll get into more detail in future videos, but you just need to know that the 1 and the 6 are the relative major and minor. So G major and E minor have a very special relationship. They're the relative major minor pair. So G major and E minor share the same notes. The key of E minor and the key of G major have the same notes. Let's just be aware that there's a very, very special relationship between these two chords and intervals. So that basically is a very quick introduction on what notes are in music, how do we define the major scale formula, how do we use that formula to identify all the notes and chords in a key, and in that key, what chords are major and minor, and what are the notes that make up every one of those chords. So you can now go and find all the G, B, and D notes and play them in any order, and if you're playing those 3, you will be playing a G chord. So I think in a nutshell, as a beginner's introduction, I think that can be where we end. There'll definitely be future videos coming. Please let me know if this added value and if you want to see more information like that. And I will be putting this file in the Dropbox link in the bottom of the video. Thank you very much.